In this video, we're going to be looking at the disturbing origins of real-life images, and even some cases of unsettling pictures from the internet that have led many to question where they even came from. With that being said, let's get straight into it. Believe it or not, this is actually a promotional photo for a film titled The Skywayman. Omer Locklear, who's the man in the photo, was an American daredevil stunt pilot and film actor who played the main role for the film. In this shot, he's seen on top of a crashed Curtiss Jenny biplane. Since the plane was already destroyed, they used it as a prop for the advertisement to showcase how dangerous the stunts were. But unfortunately, these stunts would not only end the life of Omer Locklear, but another man named Milton Elliott, who played alongside Omer. During a regular night of filming on August 2nd, 1920, a stunt was being filmed that involved floodlights to help guide both Omer and Milton, as they were the pilots for the film. Originally, the scene was meant to take place during the middle of the day, but Omer wanted it to be a bit more dangerous, so he requested that it took place during the night. He also already told the general public that the stunts were going to be more daring than ever, so after a bunch of arguments, a couple back and forth, Omer eventually got his way. The movie at the time was so hyped that there was even a live crowd watching this entire thing go down. For the set, both Omer and Milton were operating a biplane and instructed the crew members to turn off the lights when they were getting close to the ground. Multiple flares were attached on the wings to give an illusion that the plane was on fire, as the purpose of the scene was to mimic a plane crash. However, things would end horribly for the both of them. The lights would never be turned off, which meant that both pilots weren't aware of how close to the ground they were. Unfortunately, this led both Omer Locklear and Milton Elliott to crash into an oil sump, killing them instantly. Now, this was already a tragedy itself, but I'm just gonna let you guys know that it gets even worse. Because this was the final scene and all the other scenes were already complete, William Fox, who was the studio head and run the entire operation, decided to capitalize on the crash and boast the death of the two actors in his movie. So he insisted that the final scene get completed so that they could start airing the movie. Not only were the on-screen deaths of both of them added into the final production, Viola Dana, who was Omer's girlfriend at the time, was in the live crowd during the set, and had her specific reaction highlighted in the movie. To make things even worse, the whole marketing campaign for the film was centered around the deaths of both pilots, but Omer's name was used more frequently since he was more popular. And just to show you how bad it was, here's one of the ad campaigns for the film. Every inch of film showing Locklear's spectacular and fatal last flight, his death-defying feats, and a close-up of his spectacular crash to Earth. So clearly, William Fox didn't care at all, he just knew it was going to be a hit because of the deaths. In the end, Fox Film Corporation gave 10% of the studio profits to the families of Omer Locklear and Milton Elliott. Now, as mentioned before, the film was released to the public. However, since then, no footage of the film is known to exist, with many believing that it got destroyed. All that's available are a couple of stills from the film, a couple ads, Viola Dana talking about her experience, and photos of the crash that have survived. This photo was taken by photographer John Gilpin, who happened to take a picture of 14-year-old Keith Sapsford falling to his death. However, it took John Gilpin around a week to discover what he had captured as he waited for his film to develop. To understand the outcome of this photo, we have to look into Keith's ambitions and understand his family challenges. As described by his family, Keith was a curious and adventurous kid who wasn't the biggest fan of following the rules, and often attempted to run from his family numerous times. For example, there was an instance where he and his family took a trip overseas. It was believed that since he was an ambitious kid, this would be a great way for him to adventure and just do whatever. And that's exactly what he did. But it involved him running away from his family during the trip. They ended up finding him, but this was a common occurrence for Keith. Eventually, Keith's parents had enough, so they came to the conclusion that he needed some discipline. In this case, they put him into a Catholic educational institution that specializes in dealing with troubled children, known as Boys Town. Keith heavily despised Boys Town, and within the first couple of weeks, he managed to escape, but instead of going back home, he had a different idea. Keith went straight to the Sydney Kidsford Airport, which seemed odd at the time, but should have been taken more seriously. As soon as he arrived at the airport, he knew that he couldn't just travel alone on a plane without a documentation, so he decided that sneaking onto the tarmac of the airplane So he decided that sneaking into the tarmac of the airport was his best option. While there, he noticed a Douglas D-38 plane that was prepared for boarding, and he seized the opportunity. Something that I should have mentioned earlier is that Keith's father, Charles Sapsford, had a background in industrial and mechanical engineering, and so we discussed with Keith about the dangers of attempting to stow away in a plane's undercarriage a couple months prior to the incident. Charles even told him about the case of a young Spanish boy who had decided to do so, and he ended up dying because of it. However, even with all the warnings, Keith still didn't care and did his own thing. When Keith hit onto the wheels of the airliner, he failed to realize that he was in the compartment where the wheels of the plane get retracted after takeoff. So when that moment finally happened, Keith Sapsford fell 200 feet to the ground and died on impact. As mentioned earlier, John Gilpin was taking pictures of the aircraft, and he just happened to be at the right place to catch this disturbing image. Just a week after, he noticed an image of a boy, who he wasn't aware of at the time, falling out of a plane, in which he then showed the local police, and they were able to put 2 and 2 together. After investigation of the aircraft, agents found handprints, footprints, and shred from Keith's clothes, and with the picture as well. That's all the evidence that was needed. It was also noted that if Keith somehow hadn't fallen out of the plane, he still would have died from being suffocated or frozen due to the compartment reaching freezing temperatures and for it not being oxygenated. Keith's parents learned about the death of their son 2 days after the incident from the local police, in which they were both in complete shock as they just assumed that he ran away from home and just chilled at a friend's house. After hearing about the news, Charles Sapsford explained to the press about his final thoughts about his son. All my son wanted to do was to see the world. He had itchy feet. His determination to see how the rest of the world lives has cost him his life. This image of a man looking out of a bus window doesn't seem that odd, unless you know who this is and what he did. On August 23, 2010, Rolando de Rosero Mendoza boarded a tourist bus in Fort Santiago, Philippines. Upon entering the bus, the driver was confused as to why Rolando was wearing a police uniform while being armed with an M16 and a handgun. But by the time he got inside, things got hectic, as Rolando shouted out saying that everyone in the bus were his victims. Before I go any further, I want to give credit to the YouTube channel Treasure Diaries, who covered this case in full detail on their channel. I used some of the information and reference for my video, and overall the creator did an excellent job on explaining this controversial event. So if you wish to show support to this channel, I'll leave all of their information down below in the description. Alright, let's move on now. In total, there were 24 people on the bus, with 4 of them being tour guides, Alberto Lubang, who was the bus driver, and 20 tourists from Hong Kong. Keep that in mind that they were from Hong Kong, as this is going to be an important part later on in the investigation. Now, to understand why Rolando did this, we have to learn a bit about his history. He was a former policeman that was fired due to an alleged drug violation, and because of this, he ended up not receiving any retirement benefits since he got terminated a year prior to being eligible. And because of this, he heavily despised the police force he was just working with. While on board, Rolando had clear control of everyone and would send orders to the bus driver. Alberto Lubang was handcuffed to his steering wheel to ensure he wouldn't escape, but Rolando still gave him orders. His first command was to go to the Rizal Park and stay at the Carino Grandstand, which is a notable landmark site in the Philippines. This was an odd occurrence, however, as seen through the photos and footage because, well, it was the only bus there at the moment, and it wasn't even scheduled to be there. Also, for some reason, Rolando would just poke out of the window and flex his gun. So obviously that startled everyone and the police were quickly called. In order to get him to stop, 2 negotiators were called up for the task. They were Orlando Yebra and Romeo Salvador, both of which were Mendoza's former colleagues. So when speaking to him, Rolando said he had one demand, which was to be reinstated back to the police force, and if that happened, he would leave the bus with handcuffs on. Now obviously they couldn't come to an agreement, so the Manila Police SWAT and Special Action Force team were called to the scene. It was during this time that the mainstream media was covering every single part of this, so this meant that government officials were watching themselves. The Vice Mayor, Isko Moreno, explained that he would help in this situation and made his way to the office of the ombudsman. After a long talk, they explained that he would receive a fair trial regarding his police suspension, so Mendoza allowed 6 tourists and 2 tour guides to be let off. Things were going well until Rolando started to get mad at the media. Remember how I told you that the media was reporting everything? But Rolando didn't like it that he was being deemed as a bad guy, and he felt that he had no say in the situation. Also, Rolando was able to see this all because they were broadcasting the entire scene, and he was able to watch it all since there was a TV in the bus. Rolando then asked the officers if he could get some reporters in here to talk with him so that he could share his story. And of course these reporters aren't going to risk their lives, so they were like, no, we do not want to do this. And unfortunately, this made Rolando even more frustrated. Eventually, he posted 2 signs on the window stating, "Media now and 3 PM today deadlock." Basically stating that he wanted to talk to the media before 3 PM, and if he didn't, he was gonna start shooting. And to be honest, no one really took it seriously because they were like, okay, if he really wanted to shoot someone, he would have done it already. So what he did is he handcuffed the remaining tour guide to the front door and told the officers outside that if no reporters talked to him before the deadline, he was going to execute the tour guide in front of all the cameras. Flash forward to 1 hour until deadlock, and Mendoza's brother, Gregorio, went to the bus and attempted to get him to stop. Eventually, him and his brother talked it out, and the deadline was then pushed to 6 PM that night. A radio was then given to Mendoza so that he could talk to everyone, and of course, his entire conversation was being broadcasted onto the news. Let's just say all these news outlets wanted to get the best live coverage, and some of them took it way too far. Around the area, there were a bunch of hidden snipers trying to get a clean shot of Rolando, and for some reason, some of these news stations were pointing out to where the hidden snipers were. And if you remember, Rolando could see all of this in the TV in the bus, so essentially they were helping him. But as time went by, Rolando would eventually let loose again. While watching the news, he saw his brother get arrested, and it was noted that he was carrying a handgun. For safety purposes, the police confiscated it. Also, the officers said that since he couldn't necessarily prevent his brother from releasing the hostages, they arrested him for attempted conspiracy, as they believed that he wasn't there to help at all. Rolando was beyond furious at this point, and unfortunately, this is when he started shooting at the people. So then the SWAT team and the Special Action Force team knew they had to get him out of there. But here's another thing that caused controversy. Instead of sending the SWAT team or the Special Action Force team, one of the general commanders insisted that the police should be the one dealing with it, and not the, highly qualified group. He was heavily questioned for this, but they didn't have enough time to argue. They had to get him killed. After a bunch of trial and error, they realized that the police weren't doing that good. They were throwing rocks, using ladders to climb on top of the bus, but nothing seemed to be working. And then that same commander who insisted that the police deal with it all said, "You know what, I made a mistake. Let's make the Special Action Force team deal with it. The ones who probably should have dealt with it in the first place." And just like that, in a couple of minutes, they were able to get a clean shot at him. Also, contrary to what the bus driver said, it was determined that a total of 9 people, including Mendoza, were killed in that bus. The 13 remaining survivors were rescued and taken to the hospital for their non-life-threatening injuries. In the end, Gregorio Mendoza was charged as a co-accomplice, along with many other charges. Numerous media personnel were also fined due to their involvement and for compromising information that benefited Mendoza. And last but not least, this case created a huge conflict between the Philippines and Hong Kong government, as a separate investigation was conducted for the incident. Remember in the beginning when I said that the tourists were from Hong Kong? Well, that was taken heavily into consideration in the final investigation. After everything was examined, they concluded that the Philippine officials' poor handling of the situation caused the 8 hostages' deaths. Because of this, the Hong Kong government issued a black travel alert for the Philippines, which basically meant at the time, they cancelled all travels to the Philippines and announced that all Hong Kong citizens that were visiting there to leave as soon as possible. So to keep things blunt, in the end, this whole situation was poorly executed. Alright, now this is a part of the video where I have a couple user submitted images that some of my supporters gave me. So first things first, I just want to thank them all, and I hope you guys enjoyed this part of the video. As for most of these images, I did a reverse image search to find out its earliest origin. However, this one was mentioned in a Reddit post around a year ago. It was on the creepypasta subreddit, and someone asked if they knew where this thing came from. After scrolling through some comments, this user explained that it came from an old series on YouTube based on Slenderman that was known as Tribe 12. They further added that this was an edited image of an antagonist named Firebrand. So I started watching some of the videos on YouTube and I found out that Firebrand was just an alias name and identity from an alternate timeline, whose full name in the series is Noah Maxwell. Now while watching the videos, I couldn't find the specific frame that had the original image, and chances are it might not even be on an actual video. But that really didn't mean anything, because I found this image that is likely the full original image. As mentioned in the Reddit post, the commenter explained that this image was edited, so I guess that's where it ended off for this image. While at the time this image had no official name, people have heavily memed this picture and have said that this is a monster that chases you up the stairs after you turn off the lights. But clearly that's not the case. Doing a quick image reverse search revealed the picture's earliest appearance, which was on DeviantArt. It was posted by user Smogtease on October 19, 2012, with the caption stating, "Oh, I used your bathroom." Smogtease's account is currently inactive, but their old responses to some of the comments are still available, with the majority of them being positive. "So you made this photo. Man, you're a natural." Yes indeed. Sadly, on a low resolution setting of the camera, with the lighting so low. Is that a fursuit? It was a horror mask. Now I know the source. I've seen this all over the internet. Congratulations, I'm so sorry. I've given up trying to get every place the source where it comes from. That aside, I hope dear Mr.Grin has given you a fright from time to time when he pops up. This was arguably the most interesting comment, since Smogtease possibly revealed the name of the creature as they referred to it as Mr. Grin. Now, if you've been on the internet or know anything about creepypastas, you have definitely seen this picture. The Red Mist picture, or more commonly known as Squidward, has been part of a creepypasta story that was posted on 4chan's paranormal board by an anonymous user back in April 2010. They also explained that they were an intern for Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005. They added that since they worked directly with the editors and animators, they got to view the new episodes for numerous shows a few days before they aired. Before every episode played, a title card was shown, and this episode was titled Squidward. As mentioned by the author, the episodes would have mock-up names created by the employees before they were released, so they would typically give them a phony name and sometimes they were disturbing as an inside joke, which is why nothing was questioned when this morbid name was presented on screen. Well, as the episode went on, the OP started to realize that this episode was darker than imagined. In one of the scenes, Squidward is seen crying on the edge of his bed, to which the screen then zooms into his face and reveals the iconic still image. Other disturbing images were shown and described in the episode, but in this case I'm only going to be focusing on Squidward's image. 3 years later, after the story was made public, a Redditor identified himself as the author. He stated, "I don't know why, but it feels nice to see something you created spread and get brought up years later when people discuss things that scare them, because it is something that has stuck with them after reading it despite it being a creepypasta. What people read is a hasty final draft I wrote on a whim." While the story itself garnered a ton of attention, so did the image, and many wondered where it even came from. As of now, this screenshot of Squidward's face has been speculated to be the original image, and it's also believed that his eyes are the same one in the iconic Smile Dog image. However, with all of that, it still leaves us wondering where the background of the image came from. It's believed that it's just a poorly edited version of the background of the Smile Dog image, but as of now, nothing has been confirmed. Also, something that's neat about this is that a reference to the image actually made an appearance in one of the SpongeBob episodes titled SpongeBob in Random Land. In this episode that aired in September 2019, both SpongeBob and Squidward traveled to a strange dimension. At one point in the episode, Squidward opens several doors, to which one of them reveals a variation of the Red Mist Squidward image. However, since then the scene had to be altered due to complaints of it being too scary for children. And that's the end for today's video. If you made it to this point, I just want to thank you so much for staying. I hope you guys enjoyed this one because I really tried mixing things up. Usually I just talk about internet images that are like scary, but this one I focused on like 3 different real life occurrences. So I hope you guys enjoyed that part. Also, I mentioned this in the last video, but I'm trying to be more consistent. As some of you may know, I run another channel that's specifically for ASMR, so I'm kind of working with two channels and just trying to test things out, and my schedule has been all over the place, so if I'm not posting here as often, I'm sorry to say that I'm also posting on another channel, so that's why. But yeah, I'm just gonna end things off for now. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a great one. But before you leave, I just want to let you know that I truly mean that. I truly hope you watching do have a great one. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.